What's up, everybody? Welcome back to the Things You Don't Hear in Church podcast. My name is Ethan.
And my name is Derry.
And today we have a really fun episode. It might be really triggering depending on how you feel about the subject, but we are having our second ever debate. If you want to see our first one, it's between me and Derry on if Jesus could sin. You can find that right there. But today we are having on Tate Medina, who we had on before to talk about abortion, talk about how to
We talk about atheism.
Yeah,
talk
a lot about a lot of things. How to make friends with atheists and why we should make friends with atheists. And we have him on today with us, and we also have Kyle LaPoure, and these guys are going to have a discussion about the subject of abortion. Now, see, Kyle is not a Christian, and Tate is, and so this is not a theological conversation about what Christians should find acceptable or any idea of the Bible and if the Bible defends it or not. This is a conversation about the morals of and what the efficacy of the subject is, and coming from two opposite worldviews. So we're hoping this is a mature and friendly conversation of two opposing views. So without any further ado.
Yeah, what's up? I'm Kyle LaPoure. Just some random engineering student out in Pennsylvania right now, who's from Colorado. And I used to be Christian. I used to be pro-life, and just over, I guess I couldn't really pinpoint a day, but over the course of my life, I've kind of changed my views a bit. And now, especially legally, I am pro-choice. So, yep.
Hi, I'm Tate Medina. Some of you might know me from my TikTok creations. I go by Your Local Theistic Nuisance or YoungBabyTate on there. I am a Roman Catholic. I am pro-life. I do not hold pro-life stances because of my religious views. If I became an atheist tomorrow, I think I would still be pro-life because I believe that abortion is unethical for purely secular reasons. So yeah, that'll be our discussion for today, I believe.
Sweet, awesome. Yeah, so we're excited to get into it. So, Derek, do you have a question that you want to pose to them, and they can take it from there?
Yeah, let's just start with the beginning of bodily autonomy, where you guys said you wanted to start at the beginning of that.
Sure, Kyle. You said you had been studying a lot more of what bodily autonomy means. So if you want to jump into that.
And so, quickly, in disregards to bodily autonomy, I do still hold the personhood argument, sort of, in the picture. I just think it's a lot better to just start with bodily autonomy. So basically, with bodily autonomy, it's an argument that basically assumes that a fetus in any development is a full-fledged person with full-fledged rights, just like anybody else that you'd assume has rights. And it is an argument that, attempts to then, even given that as a person, you're still allowed to remove that person from your body because you have control over your body. So that, is kind of the quick little rundown of the argument. And it's kind of interesting, because of that, I can just straight up assume and just grant the personhood, even though I think on my position it'd be a bit dumb to just immediately grant that. But, for the sake of argument, for bodily autonomy, I can assume that a unicellular organism has the same rights as a person, and then just still try to justify abortion legally.
Okay, so I guess want to quickly address the elephant in the room. Why are four white men having a conversation about abortion? So I would just like to qualify that and say that yes, I understand that none of us in the room will ever become pregnant. That being said, this is a ethical discussion, and anyone of sound mind can have conversations about ethics and has a duty to speak out about what they believe is unethical. For instance, I will never, as a white male, will probably never be the victim of systemic police brutality, but that still doesn't relinquish me of the duty to speak out against it. And I would hold that the same holds for, any other ethical discussion, including ethical discussions about abortion. That being said, personally, I'm of the opinion that this is a pretty severe topic that we're going to be discussing. We're both, very friendly with each other. We're kind of that this is a serious moral discussion, because if her is wrong, then we're needlessly oppressing women. And if the pro-choicer is wrong, then discussion. The essential pro-life stance would be that it's wrong to directly kill innocent human persons, and therefore abortion is wrong.
So
Yeah, you're
good to
good.
just go?
Yeah.
All right. Yeah. So, I mean, I guess I mean, do you want me to just kind of jump into
Yeah,
my?
we'll just have a conversation between each other, Kyle.
Okay.
Yeah, we're just gonna be in the background and like.
If we start yelling insults at each other, we'll calm it down and stuff like that. But
yeah,
you can
we'll
go for it.
mediate if you guys get like too aggressive, or if we're beating a point to death too much, and we kind of want to
we'll
get
move
into
on.
another one. But other than that, it's like you guys just take the show and just like talk, because really you guys are what the audience is like wanting to hear, right? We're just gonna mediate and be here.
Yeah. So, and yeah, again, so I mean, we can just jump right into it. So, I mean, I don't think that, you know, I don't think that I guess just initially hearing your kind of proposed argument, I don't think that necessarily bodily, like I don't think that really refutes anything with bodily autonomy, because I mean, I think the act of consenting to sex isn't necessarily a crime in itself, and so I don't think that you're really perpetrating any innocent person, I guess I would say. And so I think as far as I see it, under that realm, I don't think anything is really going against bodily autonomy in that regard.
Okay, so can I ask a couple questions then?
Yeah.
So are you saying that because consent to sex is not consent to pregnancy, that I just want to clarify what you're saying. I'm not going to like ask you any leading questions. I just want to. So you're saying that because consent to sex is not consent to pregnancy, that like you don't necessarily have a parental obligation, even if the fetus is a person?
Well, yeah, I mean, that goes off into another thing too, is like parental obligation. Like I don't like that's its own thing. Like, it's one thing to carry a fetus, and then it's another thing to like be consenting to be an actual parent for it, because obviously those two things are different, because you can adopt a child. But I mean, I think even under the case of you like explicitly causing somebody to be dependent on you, I don't think, like, I still think that you have the right to like remove them from your body. I guess, you could think about an instance in which a mother like causes the kidney failure of her son or something. I don't think that, like, I think that in itself is a crime, but I don't think that her not giving up her body is a crime.
You mean like her kidneys, for instance, to donate her kidneys to her son?
Donate kidneys, yeah, to like give up her blood or give up her kidneys to her son. You can come up with any, type of analogy, but I guess with the analogy of the kidneys, yeah, I don't think that she's obligated to give her kidneys, or say if it was she caused them to like cause her son to become like bleeding out or something. I think that is a crime, but I don't think that her not giving up her body is a crime.
So do you think morally or like legally speaking?
Legally.
Okay, gotcha.
Legally. Mm-hmm.
So, okay, so like it's kind of like the violinist argument where it's like you've been kidnapped, or even let's say that you consented to do X, you consented to walking into a neighborhood which you know meant that you might be kidnapped and plugged into like a famous violin player. So I guess for people watching who aren't used to philosophical discussions, what happens a lot in moral philosophy is we talk about, you know, the actual issue itself. In this case, it would be abortion, and then we'll talk about we'll use analogies or, you know, propose moral scenarios in order to see if a moral principle like holds, essentially. And that's just kind of what happens. If people are sitting here thinking like, what does this have to do with abortion? Like, that's what it is. So for instance, we're talking about bodily autonomy, which is the idea that the mother has a right to control her own body, and if she wants to remove an unborn human from her body without her consent, essentially, that she should have the right to do that. So that would be the bodily autonomy stance. And so we're kind of just jumping in to other examples of like organ donation to show that like parents don't have an obligation to give parts of their body to even like their sick children, even if the parents made them sick. Am I getting that right, Kyle?
Yeah.
Cool. All right. So I guess a couple of questions I have would be like straight away. Can you clarify what bodily autonomy entails under your view? Like, what is bodily autonomy and what is it not?
Yeah, I mean, I guess, I guess philosophically, like it has a broad spectrum, you know, like, and obviously, I mean, I don't think it's absolute by any means. I mean, I think when a like criminal stabs somebody, like they're kind of relinquishing a bit of their bodily autonomy to then go to prison, or, you know, like there's so much stuff, you know, laws against, you know, drunk driving or whatever it is. Like there are specific instances in which we're allowed to violate bodily autonomy. But I think in this instance, it specifically is about the magnitude to which the state would be forcing you to do something that especially like is physically like in your body, in which it like severely negatively affects you. Because I mean, we can all know that, like, I mean, we're all guys, but we know that pregnancy can severely like impact a woman's life negatively, and like it is a parasite, like definitionally. So like,
say that like conceptually it's a parasite, but a parasite by definition is something of another species that preys upon another species in a parasitic relationship in order to sustain itself. I mean, you can argue philosophically an unborn is a parasite, but I still definitely have concerns about referring to members of the human family as parasites. Historically, that has been something that we regret doing, for instance, in Nazi Germany.
Well, in this instance, it actually is a biological parasite. It actually falls under the realm of kleptoparasitism. So it definitely is both a parasite, especially in the conceptual sense, but definitely in the biological sense as well, as it is literally zapping the nutrients out of the mother and taking those nutrients. And, you know, that's completely fine if the mother consents to that happening. You know, if she's okay with that, then that's all good. But I don't think that anybody...
Are infants who are breastfed by their mothers parasites by definition then?
To a degree, I would say.
Okay.
Yeah.
Just wanted to see about that.
Mm-hmm. Yeah. I mean, to a degree, but well, I mean, I guess it's a little bit different, I guess, when it comes to like what you're consenting to. Like, does that really become a parasite anymore if you want it? Maybe not. But yeah, I mean, we kind of can agree, you know.
So children aren't parasites if they're wanted by their parents.
Maybe, yeah. I mean, I guess I'm fine going either way on that.
All right.
But
yeah,
either way, less like with a mother who definitely doesn't want to be pregnant, I don't think that, I think that the fetus is definitely shown to be a parasite. I mean, worse than, you know, a lot of parasites could be. So
So,
Um,
so I guess my question is regarding bodily autonomy. What would be your moral principles for determining when it's okay to violate bodily autonomy or to kind of supersede bodily autonomy and when it would not be okay? Like what
yeah.
principles are you using?
I mean, I guess there isn't like a definitive line. I mean, I would say the line comes closest to like actual like organ like taking from your physical body like that.
Mm-hmm.
um I think that is typically like where we are really like that's where we're drawing the line. We're not as a government allowed to force people to give up like their physical bodies. But I think when it comes to like consenting to an action,
What
um
do you mean by giving up your physical body?
I guess I mean like your actual blood, your actual organs, your actual body. Like I don't think you can equate like, for instance, I don't think you can equate pregnancy to a mother like just providing typical food for a kid. Those are very, I think the bodily autonomy that's violated during pregnancy is way up here, and the violation for the bodily autonomy of say like a father paying for child support is way down there.
What's
Uh,
the reason? What's I guess like that's what I'm trying to pin down. So for instance, is it because it's so burdensome or is it because it's a rather it's an extraordinary or like uh unnatural thing for someone to like say donate their kidneys? Because I agree with you. I don't think
I
that
think
the
it's a,
government should.
I think it's a
Hmm?
combination of both of those things that you just said. I think it has
Okay.
to do with yeah, with I would say it has to do with both of those, especially like, that's just, I just think that it's too much to ask if we're going like, for instance, like when we're like for I guess for the instance of driving, like there's the chance that you could kill somebody just by like consenting to driving. um but like just the mere we'd have to regulate driving to be illegal if we're able to just say that causing somebody to be dependent on your body just by mere accident is illegal, if that makes sense.
Well, so here's what I would say about that. There is a sense in which that's true, but that being said, if you consent to driving, you aren't consenting to a car crash. You're just consenting to the fact that there is a known risk to other people, and if other people are affected by, let's say, you get in a car crash and it's your fault, you are obligated to provide compensation. The same would hold, for instance, if you were doing something like playing baseball in your own backyard. You understand there's always a risk that you could have a baseball fly through your neighbor's window. It would be no use if that happened for you to go to your neighbor and be like, well, hey, I didn't consent to the ball flying through the window. I only consented to playing baseball. So I don't know you a new window or anything like that.
Yeah, so with that kind of like baseball analogy, I guess like what I'm completely agree, like if you break somebody's window, then and you're kind of playing baseball negligently, I mean, I think like if you're playing baseball like at a regulated game, and I might be wrong in this, but I think if you were to hit a home run something and then it hits somebody's car and breaks their window, I'm not sure if you're obligated to pay that, because I think maybe that's part of the risk because it's all set up.
Well,
uh,
well, I don't know about that. I think if not you, then at least the people who hosted the game would probably be obligated to like pay for the damages to the car, unless there was some sort of like tacit agreement that if there was some sort of sign that said like park here at your own risk or something like that.
yeah, maybe. But I think like part of that is like you kind of negligently playing baseball, right? Like you just playing in an area in which there's all these houses and you doing that. I mean, I think that's a big part of it. And then also, like for instance, when you're playing baseball, you break somebody's window, there's like a pretty low level of bodily autonomy that's being infringed, and you just kind of paying to like replace their window or get that fixed in some way.
Sure,
But
it's just to
say,
illustrate the principle.
say like you hit the ball through the window, and then it uh you know I mean, I guess this would be like a crazy analogy, but I guess like comes like you hit the ball, goes to the window, and like causes somebody to like break their tibia, and now you need to give them your tibia. Like I don't think the government can like make you give up some type of your body in any way in that instance. You know, I think I agree that like as a society, I think it's fine to take that level of bodily autonomy infringement in which you're having to pay for something like a window, but under no circumstance I think that just because you consented to playing baseball in any way, shape, or form, the government should be allowed to force you to carry something for 9 months that, quite frankly, can be dangerous in many ways. And I mean, you know the rest. I mean, it can be very negative in many ways.
Okay, so yeah, so I would agree that consent to sex is not consent to pregnancy. I just want to put that out there. So I do agree with that. That being said, like the principle that I was kind of trying to illustrate and draw out is that consent to sex is acknowledging the risk that you may bring into existence a person who is dependent by nature. So if you are obligated to provide for them in some sort of way. This is what I would argue where parental obligation comes from.
So when you're using that with any of the other analogies that you're using, the bringing into existence part of mere just conception would be a crime, because the crime or like the issue that at hand that you're doing is like breaking somebody's window or causing somebody to be dependent. But I'm not so sure that just the mere creation of somebody is itself a crime that you need to
I don't think it is either.
pay back. So that whole responsibility thing is just completely nullified in the light that it's not a crime to have to create create somebody.
I have a scenario for you. So let's say that I was a field scientist who was stationed in a remote place in Alaska. I get put into this lab, right? It's Professor Utonium's lab. And part of my duties there are to work on experiments. But he also says, well, you know, if you get bored and you really want to have some fun, because we've studied this and found that it's very enjoyable. Then he kind of gives me the recipe for what to do. So I go and I do the recipe, right? So I take some sugar, I take some spice, and I take everything nice, and then I add the secret ingredient, which is chemical X. And now I have brought into existence an infant, a little Powerpuff Girl infant. And do I have an obligation to care for that infant? It's not a crime to bring like a needy, dependent infant into existence, but do I still have an obligation to care for them, or could I just leave them in the lab and let them die, go about my business?
Well, I mean, off the bat, I would say that that's not analogous, because I think I think we should separate the parental thing with the like having somebody attached to you thing, because I mean, we could probably agree that like safe haven laws should be a thing, and that
there is no safe haven. This is a remote lab in Alaska. I would at least have to care for the child for, several months.
Well, then I think that leads to just complete absurdities. Like just the mere consent to sex is consent to being a parent. Then everybody who you see having sex is legally consenting to having a kid. So the government can just go around giving somebody a kid.
That's not what I'm saying.
Okay.
I'm not saying that consent to sex is consent to parenthood. What I'm saying is consent to an action which may or may not bring someone very dependent upon you specifically into the world. You're acknowledging that you would have to provide basic care for that person in that instance.
Yeah, that's where I think the basic care is a huge part of that. I don't think that basic care is giving up your organs for 9 months.
So what is the basic care for an unborn human being?
What is the basic care? I mean, I don't really think you're able to do, I think the threshold for for that would be like the threshold to keep it alive. But I don't see like that as being something that's basic or just should just be ordinary, that you have to provide your organs to somebody for 9 months. I just don't see that as being like something that is just, oh, like that's just basic care, basic fundamental care. That's very different than just fundamental care of
why isn't it basic? Why isn't gestation basic care for an unborn human being?
That's just because that's just way too much to ask for. I don't think I don't think that is like fundamental just care. I think to ask for.
Okay, so you think it's like too burdensome? Essentially, it's too much to ask of a mother.
Yeah. Okay,
so for instance, let's take it back to the little baby Powerpuff Girl in the Alaskan lab. So would you hold that legally I should be obligated to take care of this infant, this needy, dependent infant that I brought into existence? Would I have an obligation to provide like basic needs to this infant?
Wait, so in your analogy, you're saying that what is the probability that you bring the kid into existence?
I don't know. Let's say 1 in 100.
I don't think so.
I shouldn't have an obligation to care for this infant?
Well, and I mean, I guess it starts getting like into muddied waters, because like I think maybe if you can isolate like that act itself, maybe. Well, I guess you are directly comparing that to sex, right? Like just because it's pleasurable, right?
Yeah, sneaky.
Yeah. I mean, it is a little odd. I mean, I guess still, like, I don't think that you're legally obligated to give up your body.
Well,
even if you're like purposefully trying to have the kid, like even if you're initially consented, like even if you're happy with it at the start to have that kid, I still think you're able to relinquish.
Well, you keep taking it to pregnancy. I'm talking about specifically in this laboratory scenario.
Yeah,
I think you are saying.
Yeah.
You are saying that I have no obligation to provide for the basic needs of this infant, this newborn.
I guess to an extent, like, kind of like, I guess you could compare it to, I think you might have used this in like the discussion we like had before, in which you're like somebody's dropping a baby off like at your porch. Like maybe I think it's okay for us to say that you should legally be required to like call 911 and have the state take the kid away. But I think a state has failed if it's not able to have a system in which people are able to relinquish consent from their kids.
I don't think that sounds like a failed state to me. I think that sounds like basic expectations that should be placed on parents. For instance, let's talk about rural India, a place where there isn't really an adoption system, but parents, it's burdensome, but parents have what they need to provide basic care for, like, say, their 1-year-old or their 2-year-old. But infanticide is pretty common in India. Should that be illegal?
Well,
in your eyes? Even if there's no like safe haven laws or adoption available?
I would say especially if abortion is illegal, then I think if you're forcing somebody to have a kid, then at that point.
What if abortion is just not widely available? Because I want to make sure I'm getting clear. I really hope you're not saying that I would have no obligation to care for a newborn and that that I brought into existence and that I'm allowed to let it die.
Well, and I think that's because, like, you're not. I don't think that you're responsible to that extent. Well, again, we're getting into the parental part, not the whole actual like attachment part for 9 months. That type of bodily autonomy.
Sure, I'm just talking about parental obligation.
Sorry.
Sure. I'm just talking about, do parents have special obligations to children that they brought into the world that other people wouldn't necessarily have as strong of an obligation to do?
I think to an extent they do, because they like 100% were consenting to the social legal contract that they're going to be a parent. Like they had all that time to realize that they weren't ready for parenthood. And so to an extent I think so. I mean, I don't think they like I think it's fine if they have to hold on to the kid for, maybe a year or two or something, but I think at some point the state should come in and say, you're not able to keep this kid, like we're going to take that for you. But yeah.
So children only have a right to not be killed by their parents if the state is developed enough to take care of their kids for them.
Well, again, I mean, I think the like killing part is a little different. Like that's not really what my argument is in any way.
What does abortion do?
You not giving up your body. That's different from me like stabbing somebody, I guess.
So what would that entail with regards to abortion? Because every method of abortion that I'm aware of directly kills an unborn human being.
So I have a quick question if I can jump in here.
Yeah.
Because Tate, it seems like you're talking about the parental side, like you said, and then Kyle, you're talking about the like bodily autonomy part. And I think you guys probably, if you guys already are aware of this, just let me know. But it sounds like you might be like speaking over or past each other in a sense where Tate, it sounds like you're saying that the reason you bring up parental responsibility in the body autonomy part is because you believe that parental responsibility starts at conception, at the pregnancy, and maybe Kyle thinks it starts later. So for that 9 months of that pregnancy in the body autonomy part, is that like, do the parents have responsibility? Is that the question you're asking, Tate?
Like kind of tease out, I guess because what we both agreed to at the beginning of this discussion, Kyle pointed out, is that we're assuming for the sake of this discussion that a human fetus is in fact a human person with the same legal rights as you and I. And Kyle's arguing that the mother's right to bodily autonomy would still hold over, for instance, a fetus's right to use their mother's body, so to speak.
Okay. You agree with that, Kyle?
Yeah.
Yeah. Okay. So, well, Kyle, I have a question for you regarding bodily autonomy.
Yeah.
What is your viewpoint on the idea that the fetus has a separate DNA strand from her mother, and that's like a life?
Yeah. I mean, in terms of like bodily autonomy specifically.
Yeah.
Yeah. I guess Tate would probably agree with me, at least if you were taking my side. Like that is completely fine. Under my argument, it's completely fine if it's its own individual. We grant it that it's a life. We grant that it is a full person. If anything, it would have less rights under bodily autonomy. The more and more we call it less of a person, but obviously that's a separate argument.
Right.
But yeah.
Okay.
I don't know if that answers the question. So, yeah.
Sure.
Yeah. So I guess the reason that I'm pressing this parental obligation point so much is because the moral principle I'm trying to tease out is that parents have an obligation to provide basic care for their children. That's what I'm arguing. And I would argue that, what basic care looks like for children depends on their age and their state of, needs. So for instance, the basic care for a toddler is going to look like, paying close attention to them, making sure that they get enough food to eat, making sure that they have a roof to sleep under, making sure that they're at least seeking out medical attention if the child is sick. And let's say for an infant, that basic care is going to look a lot different. You're going to need to basically spend as much time as possible, like taking care of that infant and possibly even making use of your body. In the case of like if an infant needs breast milk, that would be making use of the mother's body in a in your own words, Kyle, in a parasitic sort of way. And I would argue that once again, the younger that the human being is, the more dependent they are. It sounds like you're saying that. Well, I don't want to say that this is what you're saying, but it can sound like you're saying that if a human being is very needy, then they no longer have a right to basic care. I'm not saying that's your stance, but like I want to clarify.
I think that's more of a consequence, but that's not like the ideology itself. The ideology specifically is about the woman. It's specifically about the amount of bodily autonomy that's being infringed. So it has nothing to do with really the state of the other person. It just, if they are attached to me and I don't want them on me and they are negatively affecting me, I can sever any cord that is attaching us because I have that sovereignty over my own body. So yeah, if that makes sense.
So if a mother had a needy newborn, for instance, who needed breast milk for whatever reason, let's say she's snowed in a cabin for 3 weeks, or let's say, and I know this would never ever happen in the United States, but let's say there was a formula shortage and the mother is lactating, so she could provide breast milk to her child. Are you saying that if she wanted to, because she has sovereignty over her own body, she could sever that connection, so to speak, and just not provide breast milk to her child?
Well, again, I mean, I'm kind of gonna like revert back to the kind of two primary rebuttals that you have with like that kind of responsibility objections for the bodily autonomy. So again, like that instance, like she's already like 100% has full knowledge and awareness that she is a parent that has basic responsibilities for her child. And also like that degree of bodily autonomy is not really comparable to pregnancy. But in that instance, I'm not even sure if I necessarily would say that she's forced to give up her body. No.
So in principle, let's say.
But even if
if she wasn't consenting to be a parent, like she'd had this child for a while and she'd really been thinking about, I don't really want to be a parent anymore. She gets snowed into her cabin, or there's a formula shortage. She has no obligation to feed her child and she can allow it to die? Or does she still have an obligation to provide basic care to her child?
So I'm a little confused on the very first part in which she's just had the child for like a few days. It was just dropped off on her porch or something.
No, she gave birth to the child.
Oh, she gave birth to the child. So again, like I think that in that instance, like she was 100% in full awareness and knowledge that she was going to be a parent that was going to have to do things like breastfeed or like you.
Not necessarily. What if it was a cryptic pregnancy? Do you know what those are?
No.
Okay, so I've actually got the stats here. A cryptic pregnancy is a pregnancy where the mother does not know that she's pregnant, either for, up to 20 weeks, up to the entire duration of the pregnancy. This is not a exceedingly rare condition, so it's roughly 1 in 7,000 cases of pregnancy, aka like 45,000 cases a year in America. You can actually, there was a whole TV show about it. People share their anecdotal stories on TikTok a lot. I'll run into them every now and again. So let's say that's the case. A mother has a cryptic pregnancy. Either she gives birth into a cabin, in a field, wherever. She doesn't have immediate access to a safe haven like what you were arguing. Does she have an obligation to provide basic care for that child?
No, if there's no safe haven laws, absolutely not.
She could allow that child to die.
Yeah, I think that's a completely failed state. If they're forcing people who aren't ready to have kids to give up their body to their kids, I completely disagree with that.
That seems like a kind of barbaric moral principle then.
I think it's barbaric to force people to give up their bodies to something that definitely does not even have a 100% chance. Like, even if somebody's literally trying to have a kid and both of them are fertile, is vastly more, it is a much greater chance of them not becoming pregnant than not, or is a much higher chance of them not becoming pregnant than becoming pregnant. Yet we're still going to force them to give up their bodies. I think that's a bit barbaric, and I think it's a completely failed state to legalize that completely, like make that illegal and carry all the implications of that out.
Like what implications?
Yeah. Like having a police force that charges them with murder and locks them up, and has a whole judicial and legal system in which they're charged with murder, yet not have a system in which they can have safe haven laws. Those two are, they got to go hand in hand. You can't be.
Well, let's say this happens in America, where there are indeed safe haven laws, but she's snowed into her cabin, probably for 3 weeks. The newborn will starve if she doesn't provide breast milk. This is what we're talking about. I'm only asking about, in this scenario, what do you think the parental obligation is? Should she be able to should she be required to make use of her body to provide basic care for her newborn?
Well, and again,
she didn't consent to being a parent ahead of time. This could have been a cryptic pregnancy, or perhaps she had been considering giving up this child for a long time and she no longer wanted to be a parent. Whatever the reason.
I mean, I guess I'm not sure how, as of now, how much I would really care about that answer.
Why?
Because I don't think it's applicable to pregnancy specifically at all.
In what way is it? Can you point out important ways in which it's not applicable to pregnancy?
Yeah, because I don't think you can compare those. I don't think you can compare giving a kid your breast milk to being pregnant for 9 months.
I don't necessarily think so either, but what I'm trying to do is poke a hole in the concept that that the line for basic care stops at bodily autonomy.
Okay.
I'm gonna emphatically disagree with that.
Okay, so let's say in your analogy that it causes her immense pain, but she's going to be all right to give her kid breast milk. I absolutely don't think she's required to do that.
You think that that it's morally or legally permissible for her to just allow her child to die in that scenario?
Legally. I mean, I don't really care that much about the morality in this.
Right, we're talking about it legally. I understand.
Yeah.
Okay, so all right, that's an interesting implication of your worldview. I think it definitely makes me, and hopefully makes people in the audience, question whether that's a good moral principle to live by or to build a state around.
Yeah, I have a question following up your point, Kyle. That's all right.
Yeah.
So you were saying that if it causes her immense pain, then legally she shouldn't be obligated, correct?
Yeah.
Yeah. Okay. So with that being said, do you think her going through momentary temporal pain outweighs death?
In like a moral, I mean,
legally even, like, you know, we have laws against, like, I can't go murder someone, but like in the, you know what I mean? So like the idea is like, if we're saying like, oh, this woman's gonna be in pain, she shouldn't have to be subject to this pain just to care for this child that she shouldn't have the responsibility to care for. But then at the same time, it's like, well, are we going to address the fact that she is like causing the most extreme pain to another human being?
I don't think that matters. I don't think that killing is wrong because it causes pain.
Right. Sure. Okay.
Yeah, I mean, and I want to be clear in like a lot of these, you know, I actually might personally think that somebody would be morally obligated to do a certain action, like maybe legally. You know, maybe if I were to like stab somebody, make them dependent on my body. I think morally I should give up my body to them. Like that was me, you know, like cause them to be attended. Like, I think maybe morally I should be a good person and do that. My problem
Right.
is when you're going to say, all right, the state has to come in and force you to be attached to that person against your will. That's where I'm drawing the line. And I'm saying, if I stab somebody, I should be charged with the crime of stabbing somebody 100% to the full extent.
Mhm.
But I should never be charged with not giving up my body. That's kind of the crux of it.
Okay.
Okay, so I just want to make sure that we're clear here. If a mother was, if a mother for whatever reason needed to provide breast milk to her child, to have this child attached to her body in a parasitic way, as you had said before, she would not be legally obliged to do that. She could, legally speaking, allow her child to die.
Yeah.
You mentioned a failed state. To me, that sounds like a failed state, personally. But
No,
I guess
because all those rights are stemming from the exact same principle as the reason that we're not allowed to touch somebody's dead corpse after they're dead and not use their organs for science. Like, they have extreme bodily autonomy rights even after they're dead. We're not allowed to force anybody to give up any organs. All of my stuff is stemming from the exact same legal principle. And if we're going to hold that legal principle, we would be special pleading on the side of the fetus in this instance. And that's where I think it gets a little...
not just on the side of the fetus, but on the side of newborns as well.
Well, and again, that's separate from pregnancy itself. That's more into parenthood. And we keep kind of conflating those two and jumping into them.
I guess my problem is that for starters, I don't think that you have to explicitly and legally accept the social contract of parenthood, so to speak, in order to be obligated to provide basic care for a human being that you've brought into existence. Because if we take it back to the analogy of the lab where I created this little Powerpuff infant, I believe, at least this would be the principle that I would hold, and hopefully that the United States of America would hold, is that I should have to provide basic care for whatever the basic needs of this child are in order to keep them alive, in order to not kill them or neglect them to the point that they die. Even if, let's say, the only kind of food that is available for this infant is because the scientists knew that it would inevitably happen that a baby would be created using sugar, spice, everything nice, and chemical X. They have this big formula machine. Now, this formula machine has a giant, 200-pound crank that I'm going to have to use in order to, provide food for this infant. It's very burdensome on my body, frankly. But should I still be obligated to provide care for that infant, even if it's going to be very difficult for me as a parent?
And again, so there's some underlying principles that are kind of coming into play here that we keep going. So you're saying the reason that you're able to use that argument in relation to abortion, I think, is hedged on the kind of axiom that if you're responsible for bringing somebody into the world and making them dependent on you, that you're automatically responsible parentally.
I mean, if we're speaking parentally, what that just means is providing for the basic needs of that child.
Okay, so
at least until you can relinquish those basic needs to someone else who agrees to take upon that burden, like say an adoption agency.
Yeah. So with that, the basic or kind of that term that you use, it seems like it's I might be wrong. It kind of is starting to seem like a naturalistic fallacy. It seems like,
in what way?
Just because you're saying, it seems like you're saying, oh, basic care, as in pregnancy typically, involves giving up your bodily, it involves you giving up your bodily autonomy. That's the same thing as basic care in terms of having a kid and just making sure little Billy doesn't get run over by a car.
So I fail to see how this is a naturalistic fallacy. So for those who are listening, the naturalistic fallacy is when you derive like a natural fact, and then you therefore say that because it's natural, it's moral.
Yeah,
So
I think explain it more. So I guess what I'm thinking, what I'm thinking is when you say that, what kind of just like that pops into my mind is like, say you've got like kind of two different parents. Like one parent just kind of provides the basic stuff for their kid, like you use the term, in which they're kind of like making sure Billy doesn't get hit by a car and making sure that he's just fed enough to kind of be okay. And then you've got another parent who's kind of like exceeds expectations, goes out and does extra stuff for their kids and makes their life a lot better. Like I see that as kind of extraordinary, but I think even more extraordinary would be a parent who's willing to give up their body then after to that kid for 9 months for like pregnancy. Like that is even more extraordinary than the extraordinary parent in the given scenario. I don't think it's basic to say you're willing to give up your body to pregnancy for 9 months. I don't think that's basic in any way.
Okay. So what in your mind is basic care for a child?
I mean, in terms
At
of
any
like,
given stage of development.
well, and I mean, I think obviously that. Oh, sorry. Say that again. In which
I
stage?
just said at any stage of development.
Yeah,
What
and I think that might change, right? Like providing like for like a little toddler, it might make sure that you're keeping an eye on them and that you're feeding them and stuff. But then like when a kid gets a lot older, you don't really need to keep an eye on them to make sure they're not crossing the street. Like those are a little bit malleable.
Yeah, I
But
agree.
but I think especially in the case of like pregnancy, I just think that's a way too much to ask for. In terms of like basic care. Like, yeah, it is providing nutrients to them, but I don't think that giving up that amount of bodily autonomy is basic in any way.
Okay. So here's what I would say about that. I don't think that something being, because it seems like this is kind of what you're implying, that because pregnancy is so burdensome, it can in no way entail that that's basic care. I don't think that's necessarily true. For instance, if I were to, I guess we can either take it back to the Powerpuff Girl analogy, but let's just make it new. I have a baby with my girlfriend. Now I need to go and work 14-hour shifts at my job where there's a lot of dangerous chemicals, frankly, that I'm working with. It puts a lot of strain on, like I sprained my wrist the other day. That's not at all to compare this to pregnancy, but it would be pretty burdensome for me just to provide basic care for this, let's say, newborn infant that we now have. I don't think that entails that it's therefore no longer basic care. I think that basic care means providing the ordinary means for food or for, shelter, for, seeking medical attention for a child at whatever stage of development that is going to entail. For instance, a newborn is going to need a lot more attention. It's going to be a lot more burdensome. And I would hold that a unborn human, which is even more dependent, I guess the question I'm asking is there even such a thing under your worldview as basic care for an unborn human?
Is there such thing as basic care? I think if you're like fully consenting to the like legal contract of it, then yeah, I'd probably say so. That's why we're able to charge them with negligence.
Okay. So when does that legal contract of parenthood begin? And do you have to consent to the legal contract, so to speak, of parenthood in order to have to provide basic needs? For instance, again, I can take it back to an analogy where I create an infant. We just kind of skip pregnancy. Do I have to consent to a legal contract of parenthood in order to be obligated to provide basic care?
I think in that instance, you basically would be their parent if you are completely knowingly 100% just creating them instantaneously like that. When you press that button, that you are going to create something.
No, it's like a 1 in 100 chance. Let's say 1 in 1,000. I don't care.
Then no, I don't think.
I don't have an obligation to this child.
No, not necessarily. No.
Okay, so I think this might be like where. It seems like we've reached an impasse there. It seems like your stance would be that unless I am like fully aware that I am about to become a parent and I'm not doing anything to like stop that, that therefore I have. What it sounds like what you're saying is that unless I am fully consenting to the ramifications of parenthood ahead of time, that I have no obligation to a child that I bring into existence.
Maybe.
Because that sounds like a disturbing principle to me.
Well, wait. Do you mind saying? Do you mind?
Yeah, I can repeat it. So it sounds like the principle that you might be positing is that unless I fully consent to and understand that I'm about to become a parent, that I don't have obligations to a child that I bring into existence if I don't consent to becoming a parent.
Yep. Yeah, that's 100% right. I don't.
Even if it's just to provide basic needs to this child.
Yeah, I mean, I don't think that like, say, I mean, it's hard to come up with an analogy that doesn't seem preposterous.
It's okay to bring up preposterous analogies. I mean, that we're just seeing if we can apply.
Like the instance in which, well, I don't know. I guess it's just going to be rephrasing what you're saying, the same analogy of what you're doing. Never mind on that. But I mean, on top of that, I wanted to add that even with 100% knowledge of that, I do think that you can, like, to an extent, relinquish. I think you should be able to relinquish that contract. Like, I think that the state should be able to take the kid at, up to a certain age. If you aren't in a, state to be able to kind of keep that kid, Like, I think that the state should be able to. You should be able to give your kid up for adoption, if you're not able to, give that kid a basic standard of care and stuff like that.
Yeah. So I guess to kind of like reveal my hand here, instead of just continuing to ask questions, what the pro-life stance is going to be is that if you do something that is like, that you understand may carry a risk of affecting another person in a way that they're going to become dependent or some way, or that's going to affect another person, that you may incur obligations to that person, even if you didn't necessarily consent to those obligations. I gave the analogy of hitting a baseball into someone's window, but what I'm going to say is that what the basic principle that I'm positing for any society, whether there's a failed state, so to speak, or not, that parents have a basic obligation towards children that they bring into the world. And that obligation is to provide basic care to their children. Now, I still think that there is such a thing as, like, that adoption is 100% permissible, but under a pro-life view, what that would be is fulfilling your duty as a parent to provide them with basic care, because you're entrusting them to someone who will give them that basic care. But if you're not in a position to entrust them to someone else, you still have an obligation to provide care to your child. It's not at all it should not at all be legally permissible to either directly kill or allow your child to die because you no longer want to provide care for them. And this is how it ties back to abortion and why I don't think bodily autonomy is going to be relevant here. If the only kind of basic care that exists for a human person that is unborn is gestation, then you have an obligation to provide that, or at least the obligation to not directly kill them in response. That's going to be the pro-life stance.
Yeah.
Do you have it?
And I mean, I think there's a lot that we kind of went on earlier in which I disagree, but I think that one of the primary objections that I would have with that, is the threshold in which that basic care is, right? I think that you providing basic care in terms of giving up your body for 9 months is too much to ask and be framed as basic.
So, I guess why is gestation not basic care for a fetus, other than the fact that it's very burdensome? Because there is like things that most people would agree are ordinary care, like say going to work and slaving away for 14 plus hours in order to make sure that your newborn and your wife have enough to eat. That would be basic care, even despite the fact that it's severely burdensome. I'm not comparing it to pregnancy, but I'm just trying to show that just because something is burdensome, that doesn't mean it's not basic care.
Wait, can you give the example you just gave in which it was still basic care, but it was very burdensome?
Like going to work for 14 hours a day for let's say 9 months. And, in order to make sure that your newborn and your wife have enough to eat, that they've got a roof over their head, whatever, and you can qualify the circumstances or say, well, what the father should be doing is this or that or the other. Maybe, but what I'm saying is that in that situation, is he providing basic care, and should he be obligated to and make sure that whatever way he goes about it, even if the only way that he can go about it is burdensome, that he should have to provide basic care for his child?
Well, one, I think he should be able to relinquish the legal contract in which he's a parent. So,
what if the only way he can relinquish that is to kill his children? Because that would be like kind of the position that a pregnant mother would be in.
Well, but then he doesn't have. Okay, so then in that instance, I would still say that the burden is way too high, or in that instance is not comparable of the burden in which pregnancy is.
I'm not trying to compare it to pregnancy.
What I'm saying is, if you can provide an instance in which somebody's care falls somewhere in the realm of the violation of bodily autonomy that pregnancy has, and they still have to care for them, then I will completely grant that argument to you, I think. But I just don't think that if there's any instance in which a parent has to give up their body to that extent to keep their kid alive, I don't think that's way too much to ask. That's, in my opinion, that's far gone. Like, that is way too much to ask for a parent to do to keep somebody alive.
So it sounds like what your stance is that parents are allowed to kill their children if it would be very burdensome to provide basic care to them, or to provide care, to provide whatever is like. Yeah, I gotta keep saying basic care, essentially.
Yeah, and I mean, obviously, I want to make sure that's not killing them. It's just not providing the nutrients that they need. So I guess, if it costed a mother to go through a surgery, to go through an extensive surgery to keep her kid alive, I don't think that the state can force her to do that. I don't think so.
See, I would actually agree with that, because I don't think that would constitute meeting the ordinary needs of a child in that instance. They're dying of a disease, and the only way to, help them the only way to restore them to ordinary health would be to do something like extraordinary, like have their organs removed from their body, or let's say even just like donate their blood. I think I would agree that even if morally they should, whether that should be legally obligated is, a tough question. I think I would agree that you shouldn't have to legally obligate a parent to say donate their kidney to their sick child. I think I would agree with that. And how I would account for that under a pro-life principle is, once again, one, there's a difference between directly killing and failing to save. What killed the child? In that, if a child is dying of kidney disease and a parent doesn't give up their organ to their kidney to that child, what killed the child? What initiated that fatal sequence of events?
Well, in that instance, it was just their kidney failure.
Right. But in the case of a mother with abortion, for one, I would draw a disanalogy, or I would point out differences in the scenario because, one, in the case of kidney donation, the ordinary function of my kidneys is to filter the blood of this body. What is the ordinary function of the uterus?
See, that's where I think you're making your naturalistic fallacy.
I don't think so.
I don't think just because the function of a uterus is X that it should be fulfilled every time legally. Like I don't. That's definitely naturalistic fallacy there.
I want to get clear on what the naturalistic fallacy is. So I actually have it pulled up.
Just real quick for everyone, we've got about 10 minutes left. 10, 15 minutes.
Okay, cool. No problem. Just to kind of pull up my notes. The naturalistic fallacy is to start with a fact about the natural world and then to derive a moral prescription from it, or to start with an is and to derive an ought from it, versus beginning with a moral principle and using facts about the world to inform how you move forward in a moral situation. Here's what I'm doing, and here's how I'm going to explain that it's not the naturalistic fallacy. I am starting with a moral proposition, not a natural fact. The moral proposition is that parents ought to provide ordinary care for their children, or at least not directly kill their children. The natural fact that plays into this syllogism or argument is that gestation is the ordinary care for an unborn human. There is no other way to provide for the basic needs of an unborn human being. Abortion also directly kills an unborn human being. Therefore, parents ought to provide gestational care for their children if that is what they would ordinarily need, and ought not abort their child. There's no naturalistic fallacy going there.
I'd agree there. I'd agree that as far as I see, I don't think there's a naturalistic fallacy there.
That's my argument.
But the second premise, the second pregnancy is ordinary. I guess that's where I'm getting kind of hung up. Like I'm getting a little bit confused on what we mean by ordinary. Like
that's how you meet the
typical
basic
function of.
That's how the basic needs of a child at that stage of development is met.
Okay, yeah. So I guess going back to an example in which like a mother has a massive burden in which she has to go through some parasite being attached to her for 9 months to food for her kid. I don't think that the legal system should charge her for murder for not going through with that.
I
think that is too high.
Okay, so yeah, that I agree that you can challenge that premise, but I definitely just want to point out that there was no naturalistic fallacy in my argument.
think I agree.
So, okay, so here's what I'm going to say, and I guess we can kind of wrap up and like, this is going to be like how I'll close, and then I'll let you have the last word since, you're the, what's the word? You're the one who came on here, and, I've been on here before and all of that. So, again, I'm going to argue that parents ought to provide ordinary care for their children, or at least not directly kill their children. And I'm going to argue and emphatically argue that gestation is the ordinary care for an unborn human. And the reason why is that what other ordinary care could there possibly be? If a fetus is indeed a human person with a basic right to life, but then you say, well, the only way that they can receive the care that they normally need to receive, even just perfectly healthy, a perfectly healthy fetus, the only care that they could ordinarily receive, they have no right to, then what that sounds like to me is a right to life in name only. It's like saying that a disenfranchised minority has the right to vote, but people who own voting booths are allowed to not let them in if they don't consent. It sounds like it's a right in name only. Because there is no other form of ordinary care for an unborn human being. If you're going to, at least for the sake of argument, accept that the unborn is a human being with a basic right to life, what other possible way could that right be met if it's not through gestation? That's going to be my argument. If you want to say, and this is my personal stance, if we wanted to go down the route of, well, the unborn aren't human persons and they don't have a right to life, then we're getting somewhere. I would agree. If the unborn are not human persons, then I don't think that there's anything wrong with abortion. For all I care, you could get them at your GP whenever you want, 12 times a year. I don't know if that's even possible, but just to make the rhetorical point, if the unborn are not human persons with a right to life, then abortion doesn't need to be justified. If the unborn are human persons with a right to life, then nothing justifies abortion. That's going to be my argument. And that's how I'll close. And I'll just, let the audience see which of these views it would be the preferable view if we're going to live in a civilized society where people care for each other.
Yeah, and so to kind of wrap up with my kind of main rebuttals to Tate's argument, I would say that I take issue with kind of his first and second premises there, that that parents should always they always have to provide basic and ordinary care, and that pregnancy is basic and ordinary care, especially that second premise. And so, in that, I don't think that in any scenario the government should be forcing you to give up your body for 9 months, even if that's the typical way that you have to provide care for your child. And so, so I think, just like with any other instance of bodily autonomy, I think that a mother is not required to give up her organs to somebody else, just as a dead person is not required to give up their organs to science to save other people's lives, and nobody else is required to give up their organs to anybody else, even in the case of them causing dependence. And so that's kind of how I'd wrap up. And kind of, obviously, we never got to personhood arguments, but I still do hold that a fetus is not the same thing as a person. And that's probably a conversation me and Tate will have for another time. So yeah, that's kind of the pro-choice argument, is that you always have control over your body to the extent that the government can't force you to keep somebody alive. Even if you cause that state of dependence, they cannot force you. They can charge you the crime of causing the dependence, but they can't charge you with the crime of not giving up your body. That's the key argument right there.
All right. Well, thank you guys for both coming on and sharing your points. I think it was an exciting conversation.
I was glued to it. It was awesome.
Yeah, the whole time I'm like, wow, this is great. So thank you both for coming on. I believe that it was fair. I think it was mature and respectful, and you guys handled yourselves and the others' opinions very well. So thank you guys for being willing to do this and come on and not let it get too overly emotional or passionate or angry. I think it was really beneficial.
And if you ever feel like coming on and discussing that last topic that you brought up, Kyle, we'd love to have you on again.
Yeah, that'd be another follow-up. That'd be a cool follow-up discussion to have.
Yeah.
Awesome. Thank you, guys.
Yeah.
Yeah, thank you so much.
Is there anything that either of you want to plug before we go? Kyle, you have a book you've written or any videos you want people to watch or anything?
Yeah, I actually have a full 12 book encyclopedia on arguments for pro-life and pro-choice. No, I'm kidding. I have a TikTok channel, young.baby.tate. So YoungBabyTate with dots in between each word. You can go and find it there. On TikTok, if you are so inclined. If you don't like TikTok, understandable. That is very understandable. And as always, like, the point of debates like this are not to so much change the other person's mind as so much as it is to just kind of give people like a look in on the different stances so that they can decide for themselves.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah, I'll just I'll replug Tate's stuff. No, I don't create content, but no, Tate has a great channel that obviously I disagree with, but I love to engage with, and I think what he's doing is like amazing. Even if he disagrees with me, I think it's awesome that he has a very rational way of going about things, and giving that to everybody else in like a non like triggering way or non offensive way, and just allowing great discussion to foster even on something as crazy as TikTok, so go check him out. So
Yeah, Kyle, you are an absolutely incredible opponent. You're a good faith philosopher, and I really appreciate having conversations with you.
yeah, likewise.
If we have any employers out there that in a couple years want to hire an engineer, Kyle is getting his engineering degree. If you like soccer and somehow you can stream his soccer games, he plays soccer as well as college. So you can go check him out there. Somehow, I don't know if those are streamed, but that'd be cool too.
Go to actually his university and watch him play soccer.
Yeah.
Just show up, get his autograph.
Have signs, go Kyle. We saw you on TYDHC, go Kyle. Yeah.
Right on. Well, everybody, thanks for coming back and watching this episode. Make sure that you like, subscribe, comment. If you found this beneficial, send it to someone who you think would also enjoy it. If you like conversations like these, where you talk about the gray areas of the Christian faith and you like to get as much as unbiased opinion as you can on most topics, then subscribe and come back. We like to have all these conversations for the benefit of everyone learning different viewpoints. And if you find this content really encouraging or really beneficial and you want to help us out in return, we have a Patreon that you can find down below, and all of that goes to supporting the show. We just got a new computer for a new software, we're getting new lights, and so we're just always trying to improve and make everything as seamless and great as possible, and it's all thanks to you guys. So once again, thank you. Check out Young Baby Tate on TikTok and go watch Kyle play soccer. Thanks guys, see ya.